Do you ever feel overwhelmed despite endless opportunities? Do you feel increasingly disconnected despite constant digital connection? What if the very tools promising freedom are trapping you in a cycle of self-exploitation? What if the horrifying truth is that modern life, with all its conveniences, is engineered for burnout? We live in a burnout society, a world of constant connectivity and relentless pressure to optimize every aspect of our lives. This pressure leads to exhaustion, a pervasive sense of emptiness, and a feeling that, despite our best efforts, we are always falling short. Consider the statistics. Rates of depression and anxiety have been steadily climbing for decades, particularly among young adults, with a significant portion directly linked to the always-on culture and the blurring lines between work and personal life. The modern world promises us freedom and autonomy, yet it often delivers the opposite, a relentless cycle of self-imposed demands and self-exploitation. Enter Byung-Chul, a philosopher who has diagnosed this condition with remarkable precision. Hand's concept of the performance society, detailed in his book, The Burnout Society, describes how individuals internalize societal pressures, becoming both the oppressor and the oppressed. We are no longer subjected to external forces dictating our actions. Instead, we are driven by an internal imperative to constantly achieve, improve, and optimize, pushing ourselves to the brink of exhaustion. Imagine you are both the horse and the rider, constantly whipping yourself to go faster, never allowing for rest, driven by the fear of falling behind or missing out. This internal pressure is far more insidious than external demands because it operates constantly, eroding our well-being from the inside out. By the end of this video, you'll gain a critical understanding of how modern society fosters self-exploitation and discover practical strategies to reclaim your time, energy, and sense of self. We'll uncover the illusion of limitless possibilities, the subtle ways algorithms manipulate our attention, and the revolutionary power of saying no to the demands of the performance society. Prepare to transform your relationship with technology, work, and yourself, moving from a state of perpetual burnout to one of mindful engagement and authentic fulfillment. You might be thinking, is this just another doom and gloom scenario? Is it really possible to escape the pressures of modern life? It's completely understandable to feel overwhelmed by these ideas. The forces shaping modern society are powerful and pervasive. So let's delve deeper into Byung-Chul's philosophy and uncover concrete steps you can take to resist self-exploitation and cultivate a more meaningful existence. But is this freedom truly liberating, or has it morphed into a more insidious form of control? We've established that modern life fosters burnout through constant pressure. But what if the very structures promising us autonomy are actually the engines of our self-exploitation? What if we've simply traded one form of oppression for another, trading external chains for internal whips? To understand this, let's contrast two societal models: the disciplinary society, described by Foucault, and Byung-Chul's concept of the achievement society. The disciplinary society, prevalent in the 20th century, relied on external constraints. Think of factories with strict schedules, schools with rigid rules, and institutions that enforced conformity through surveillance and punishment. These were external forces, dictating your actions and limiting your freedom. The achievement society, on the other hand, operates through internal pressure. We are no longer cogs in a machine. We are entrepreneurs of ourselves, constantly striving to improve, optimize, and achieve. The external should has become an internal must. What this means is that the pressure is no longer imposed from above. It's self-inflicted, a relentless cycle of self-motivation and optimization. In other words, we are both the taskmaster and the slave, perpetually pushing ourselves harder and harder. It's similar to a hamster wheel. We run faster and faster, believing we're making progress, but ultimately remaining in the same place, exhausted and depleted. Evidence of this self-exploitation is rampant in the modern workplace. For example, consider the expectation of constant availability. Emails and smartphones have blurred the lines between work and personal life, creating an always-on culture. Studies show that the average office worker checks their email more than 70 times a day, and that 50% of employees check email outside of work hours. Think about the story of Sarah, a marketing manager who felt compelled to respond to emails even during her vacation. She constantly worried about falling behind and feared missing out on important opportunities, which made it difficult for her to truly disconnect and recharge. Evenings and weekends became extensions of her workday, leading to chronic stress and exhaustion. According to a 2023 study by the American Psychological Association, 79% of employees reported experiencing work-related stress, with nearly half saying it significantly impacted their personal lives. The implication of this self-exploitation is a gradual erosion of personal well-being. Creativity is stifled by constant doing, and autonomy is lost as individuals become slaves to their own ambition. The constant pressure to achieve leads to a state of perpetual dissatisfaction. Even when we reach our goals, we quickly set new ones, perpetuating the cycle of striving and never truly allowing ourselves to rest or enjoy our accomplishments. This relentless pursuit of self-improvement often backfires, leading to increased rates of depression and anxiety as individuals fail to meet their own self-imposed standards. We are caught in a double bind, pressured to achieve more and more, yet simultaneously criticized for not being present or mindful. Have you ever noticed this in your own life? The nagging feeling that you're never doing enough despite your best efforts. The sense that you're constantly chasing an elusive goal, only to find that it moves further away as you approach it. Is this external freedom, this freedom to choose your own hamster wheel, truly worth the internal burden it creates? But how does technology, designed to liberate us, further amplify these pressures of the achievement society, pushing us closer to the brink of burnout? What role do our devices play in this cycle of self-exploitation, and are we truly aware of the extent to which they control our thoughts and behaviors? Stay with me, because what we'll discover next is even more unsettling than what we've already discussed. How have devices, intended for connection, instead become instruments of self-inflicted labor and competition? We explored the achievement society and its relentless pressure to perform, but now let's delve deeper into how technology amplifies these pressures, turning our lives into a constant performance. Imagine a panopticon, the prison design where all inmates are visible from a central point, but they can't see if they're being watched at any given moment. This constant possibility of surveillance leads to self-regulation, where prisoners internalize the gaze and behave as if they're always being watched. Now, think about your smartphone. Is it not a digital panopticon in your pocket, constantly reminding you of your visibility and availability? This digital panopticon is fueled by the expectation of constant connectivity, leading to a state of constant self-monitoring. We are perpetually on, presenting a curated version of ourselves to the world. Byung-Chul refers to this as transparency, where everything is made visible and accessible, blurring the lines between public and private. This constant visibility creates performance anxiety. Every email, every social media post, every interaction becomes an opportunity to perform, to optimize, to present the best version of ourselves. Consider the always-on smartphone. It's not just a tool for communication. It's a portal to a world of constant comparison, a stage for self-promotion, and a leash that keeps us tethered to work even during our supposed free time. This constant visibility fosters self-exploitation in insidious ways. Think about the expectation of immediate email responses. A study by Rescue Time found that people spend an average of 3 hours and 15 minutes per day on their phones. This isn't just passively consuming content. It's often responding to emails, managing social media, and engaging in other forms of digital labor, even outside of work hours. Then there's the pressure to maintain a perfect online persona. The rise of influencers, who meticulously curate every aspect of their lives for public consumption, has created a culture of self-performance, where authenticity is often sacrificed for likes and followers. Consider the addictive nature of social media notifications. Each like, each comment, each notification triggers a dopamine rush, reinforcing the behavior and keeping us hooked. Wearable technology takes this even further, tracking our steps, our sleep, and our heart rate, turning our bodies into data points to be optimized. According to a 2022 study by Pew Research Center, 72% of U.S. adults use social media, and a significant percentage report checking it multiple times per day. Are we truly connecting, or are we simply performing for an audience of algorithms and strangers? The implications of this digital panopticon are far-reaching. Personal boundaries erode as work seeps into every corner of our lives. Deep work and focus decline as our attention is constantly fragmented by notifications and distractions. Attention deficit disorders rise as our brains are rewired to crave instant gratification and novelty. We exist in a world where everything is designed to grab our attention. The increasing pressure to perform and optimize every aspect of life for public consumption leads to a profound sense of unease. Are we truly living, or are we simply performing a role in a digital theater? Take a moment to reflect on your own relationship with technology. Does it truly serve your well-being, or does it contribute to your self-exploitation? Does it help you connect with others authentically, or does it fuel your desire to perform for their approval? But how exactly do social media platforms, designed to connect us, manipulate our attention and contribute to this sense of constant pressure and self-performance? Are we truly in control of our online experiences, or are we being subtly programmed to conform to the demands of the performance society? Social media platforms, beneath the veneer of connection, are designed to be addictive, using algorithms to capture and manipulate our attention. It is key to consider this. What if we aren't actually as in control as we think? Are we truly in control of our online experiences, or are we being subtly programmed to conform to the demands of the performance society? This is the pattern interrupt to shock the audience and regain full attention. You may think you are deciding what you see online, but social media platforms curate specific content to keep you engaged. Your social media feed is only displaying what it believes will keep you on the platform the longest. Social media algorithms work by personalizing feeds, creating filter bubbles, and prioritizing engagement over authenticity. Filter bubbles are echo chambers where we are primarily exposed to information and opinions that confirm our existing beliefs. This limits our exposure to diverse perspectives and reinforces our biases. These algorithms exploit our natural desire for validation and approval, creating a feedback loop of self-performance and comparison. Think about likes and followers as a form of social currency, driving us to seek validation through online approval. The more likes and followers we have, the more valuable we feel, leading to a constant craving for external validation. There's significant evidence highlighting the addictive nature of social media. Studies have shown that receiving likes or notifications triggers the release of dopamine in the brain, the same neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. Data consistently reveals that people spend hours scrolling through social media feeds each day, often mindlessly consuming content without engaging in meaningful interaction. Social media platforms are intentionally designed to be sticky. using features like infinite scrolling, push notifications, and autoplay videos to keep us glued to our screens. Consider the story of Emily, a young woman who struggled with social media addiction. She found herself constantly checking her phone, comparing herself to others, and feeling inadequate. She deleted all of her accounts and felt a strong sense of peace after the withdrawal period was over. Jean Twenge, a psychology professor at San Diego State University, has conducted extensive research on the link between teen mental health and social media, finding a correlation between increased social media usage and higher rates of depression and anxiety. The implications of algorithmic manipulation are profound. Critical thinking erodes as we are bombarded with information tailored to confirm our biases. Misinformation spreads rapidly through social networks, reinforcing existing prejudices and polarizing society. We are being subtly manipulated into believing things that are untrue. The constant pressure to compare ourselves to others, leading to feelings of inadequacy and envy. If we are constantly shown other people succeeding, how can we be satisfied with what we already have? Consider how social media platforms shape your perceptions of reality and influence your behavior. Are you consuming social media, or is social media consuming you? If technology and social media are contributing to self-exploitation and burnout, how can we reclaim our agency and resist the demands of the performance society? We've established that we are not in as much control of our online lives as we think, but how can we change it? Reclaiming agency begins with the ability to say no to the demands of the performance society and cultivate a more mindful relationship with technology. In a world that constantly demands our attention, how do we cultivate the inner strength to set boundaries and prioritize our well-being? Setting boundaries involves limiting screen time, disconnecting from social media, and prioritizing deep work over shallow distractions. Deep work, as defined by Cal Newport, is focused, uninterrupted work that allows for creativity and innovation. It's the opposite of the fragmented, distracted work that characterizes modern life. Saying no can be a form of self-care, allowing individuals to prioritize their mental and physical health. It frees us from the constant pressure to perform and allows us to reconnect with our values and priorities. There are many examples of individuals who have successfully resisted the demands of the performance society. Digital minimalists intentionally limit their technology use, prioritizing real-world experiences over virtual ones. Others have chosen to disconnect from social media altogether, finding freedom from the constant comparison and validation seeking. Companies are starting to prioritize work-life balance, recognizing that employees who are well-rested and engaged are more productive and creative. Consider the Danish concept of hygge, which emphasizes coziness, comfort, and connection, as an example of prioritizing well-being over productivity. Think about the story of Alex, a software engineer who was constantly burned out from working long hours and being glued to his phone. He started setting boundaries, turning off notifications, and intentionally disconnecting from technology after work hours. He found that he was more focused, more creative, and more present in his relationships. Reclaiming agency leads to increased creativity and innovation as we free ourselves from distractions and allow our minds to wander. We have improved mental and physical health as we reduce stress and prioritize self-care. We develop stronger relationships as we disconnect from technology and reconnect with the people around us. There is a greater sense of purpose and fulfillment as we align our lives with our values and priorities. What practical steps can you take to set boundaries and cultivate a more mindful relationship with technology, starting today? What activities or commitments can you say no to, freeing up time and energy for what truly matters? By understanding the insidious nature of self-exploitation and reclaiming our agency, we can begin to cultivate a more meaningful and fulfilling existence, one that is not defined by the relentless pursuit of performance, but by the cultivation of authentic experience. What we've discovered so far is concerning, but it's only scratching the surface. Stay with me because in the next section, we'll be exploring how to cultivate authentic experiences in the face of so much pressure. We've explored how technology fosters self-exploitation and algorithmic manipulation, but now let's confront a more subtle, yet equally damaging, consequence of modern life: the loss of the other. In a world striving for total transparency and control, what is lost when we eliminate the mystery and encounter with the other? This is not merely an abstract philosophical concept. It's a key to understanding why so many feel a sense of emptiness and disconnection in our hyper-connected world, and understanding it is the first step in reclaiming our experiences. The other, as Byung-Chul describes it, is anything or anyone that resists complete assimilation into our existing worldview. It is that which is different, unfamiliar, and challenges our preconceived notions. It's the person with radically different beliefs, the artwork that provokes discomfort, the natural landscape that humbles us with its vastness. The other is not simply different. It's that which pushes against our ego, forcing us to confront our limitations and expand our understanding. The other invites contemplation, not consumption. It demands engagement, not passive observation. Think of it as the friction that sharpens our minds and polishes our souls. In contrast, modern society increasingly favors sameness and conformity, driven by the algorithms that curate our social media feeds and the relentless pursuit of validation through likes and shares. We are subtly encouraged to surround ourselves with reflections of ourselves, creating echo chambers that reinforce our existing beliefs and insulate us from anything that might challenge them. Consider the experience of standing before a Rothko painting. The large, nebulous color fields don't offer easy answers or immediate gratification. They resist simple interpretation and demand that the viewer engage with their own emotions and perceptions. Or, think about the feeling of being alone in a vast forest, surrounded by towering trees and the sounds of nature. The forest doesn't cater to our desires or offer us immediate utility. It exists independently of us, indifferent to our presence. Both the Rothko painting and the primeval forest confront us with something beyond our control, something other than ourselves, something that resists being tamed. The other is the friction that allows our mind to be sharpened. But what is the consequence when we actively try to eliminate this friction from our life? But here's the insidious part. Even our attempts to encounter the other are often mediated through technology, sanitizing the experience and further distancing us from authentic engagement. The loss of the other is evident in many aspects of modern life. Face-to-face interactions decline as we retreat into the digital world, communicating through screens rather than engaging in genuine human connection. Globalization and mass media homogenize culture, eroding unique traditions and local customs in favor of a bland, corporate-driven monoculture. Social media algorithms create echo chambers and filter bubbles, limiting our exposure to diverse perspectives and reinforcing our existing biases. Even travel, once a powerful means of encountering the other, is often reduced to a superficial tourist bubble, where travelers are insulated from authentic cultural experiences and instead shuttled between sanitized attractions and pre-packaged itineraries. I recall a trip I took to Mexico City, eager to immerse myself in the vibrant culture. Instead, I found myself surrounded by other tourists, eating at Americanized restaurants, and visiting attractions that felt more like theme parks than genuine cultural sites. It wasn't until I ventured off the beaten path, explored local neighborhoods, and engaged with the residents that I began to experience the true essence of the city. Consider, how often do we truly step outside of our comfort zones and embrace the unfamiliar? What do we lose when we prioritize convenience and familiarity over authentic engagement? What is sacrificed when we avoid the possibility of discomfort or challenge? The implications of losing the other are far-reaching and deeply troubling. Empathy erodes as we become increasingly isolated in our own echo chambers, unable to understand or appreciate perspectives different from our own. Tribalism and intolerance rise as we demonize those who are other than us, creating an us versus them mentality that fuels conflict and division. Creativity and innovation decline as we surround ourselves with sameness, stifling the spark of originality that comes from encountering new ideas and perspectives. The increasing sense of alienation and meaninglessness as we lose touch with the world beyond ourselves and become trapped in a cycle of self-obsession and performance. Is it any wonder that so many feel a sense of emptiness and disconnection in a world that has become increasingly sterile and predictable? If the loss of the other contributes to a sense of meaninglessness, how can we cultivate a more profound sense of purpose and find meaning in a world that often feels absurd and chaotic? If the loss of the other contributes to a sense of meaninglessness, are we equally impoverished by our relentless pursuit of happiness? If we eliminate discomfort and negativity, do we eliminate the possibility of true growth and understanding? Consider this. In a world obsessed with positivity, perhaps the most radical act is to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, including the darkness. This is not about wallowing in misery, but rather acknowledging that suffering is an inherent part of life, and that it can be a powerful catalyst for transformation. The tyranny of positivity, as Byung-Chul elucidates, refers to the pervasive cultural pressure to always be happy, optimistic, and upbeat, regardless of circumstance. It's the demand to project an image of success and well-being, even when we are struggling internally. This pressure manifests in countless ways, from the curated displays of happiness on social media to the relentless self-help industry that promises to fix all our problems with positive thinking alone. What this means is that we often suppress negative emotions such as sadness, anger, and grief, deeming them unacceptable or even pathological. But these emotions are not our enemies. They are vital signals that provide us with information about our internal state and our relationship to the world. Authentic positivity, on the other hand, acknowledges and integrates negative experiences. It is not about denying the existence of suffering, but rather about finding meaning and resilience in the face of it. It's the understanding that growth often comes from overcoming challenges and learning from our mistakes. Think of authentic positivity as a tree that has weathered many storms, its roots strengthened by adversity. Consider the cult of positivity that has infiltrated nearly every aspect of modern life. The self-help industry, for example, often promotes the idea that positive thinking is the key to success and happiness, neglecting the importance of addressing underlying issues and systemic problems. Social media platforms are flooded with carefully curated images of happiness and success, creating unrealistic expectations and fostering feelings of inadequacy in those who compare themselves to others. Corporate cultures often demand constant enthusiasm and optimism from employees, suppressing dissent and creating a toxic work environment where burnout is rampant. The rise of manifestation culture, which promotes the idea that we can attract whatever we want simply by thinking positively, further exacerbates this problem, placing undue pressure on individuals to control their thoughts and emotions. As an example, a company mandates daily positive affirmations, leading to increased stress as employees felt pressured to be positive even when facing genuine challenges. Employees were discouraged from expressing concerns, leading to unresolved problems and decreased morale. What happens when we force positivity when it isn't authentic? What are the consequences of this constant pressure to be happy? The implications of this tyranny are far-reaching. Emotional intelligence erodes as we become less able to recognize and process our own emotions and those of others. Empathy and compassion decline as we judge those who are struggling, rather than offering them support and understanding. Anxiety and depression rise as individuals struggle to meet unrealistic expectations and feel ashamed of their negative emotions. Most significantly, we lose the ability to cope with real suffering and adversity, becoming fragile and easily overwhelmed by life's inevitable challenges. This connects directly to Hand's concept of the smooth life, where all friction and negativity are eliminated, leading to a sterile and ultimately meaningless existence. Are we becoming allergic to discomfort? The smooth life promises comfort and convenience, but at the cost of depth and authenticity. When we shield ourselves from all forms of discomfort, we become unable to navigate the complexities and challenges that give life meaning. When we disconnect from our emotions, we disconnect from ourselves. Take a moment to reflect on your own relationship with positivity and negativity. Do you allow yourself to experience the full range of human emotions, or do you try to suppress or deny the negative ones? If negativity is essential for growth and authenticity, how can we cultivate a more balanced and nuanced perspective that embraces both the light and the dark aspects of life? How can we find the wisdom in suffering? If the relentless pursuit of happiness eliminates the possibility of true growth and understanding, has our obsession with self-improvement, ironically, made us more self-centered and less equipped to deal with the inevitable challenges of life? It seems counterintuitive, but consider this. In a world saturated with images of perfect bodies, flawless skin, and meticulously curated lives, perhaps we've inadvertently fostered a culture where everyone is desperately trying to avoid any form of discomfort or suffering, even at the expense of genuine connection and empathy. What does it mean to be narcissistic in the context of Byung-Chul Han's philosophy? It's not about diagnosing individuals with narcissistic personality disorder. Rather, it's about recognizing a broader cultural trend characterized by excessive self-regard, a pervasive lack of empathy, and a constant, almost desperate need for external validation. This narcissistic tendency stems from a deep-seated fear of confronting the other, that which is different, challenging, or unsettling, and a relentless desire to maintain a flawless, unblemished self-image. Think of it as constructing an elaborate, impenetrable fortress around the self, designed to shield it from any potential threat or discomfort. The problem, of course, is that such a fortress also isolates us from genuine connection, authentic experience, and the very things that give life meaning. It's the pursuit of Hand's smooth life, taken to its most extreme conclusion. For example, consider the pervasive influence of selfie culture and the emphasis on personal branding that dominates social media platforms. Every filtered photo, every carefully crafted post, every like and comment sought after becomes a testament to this narcissistic turn. It's not simply about sharing aspects of our lives. It's about constructing an idealized version of ourselves for public consumption, one that is perpetually happy, successful, and desirable. We curate our online personas to project an image of perfection, often at the expense of authenticity and genuine self-expression. The rise of reality television offers another stark display of narcissism. Shows often reward dramatic, self-serving behavior and highlight individuals who prioritize personal gain over empathy and cooperation, creating a spectacle of self-obsession for entertainment. The focus is on the individual's journey, often framed as a quest for fame, fortune, or love, further reinforcing the idea that personal success is the ultimate goal. Furthermore, Studies reveal a concerning correlation between social media usage and narcissistic traits. Jean Twenge, a professor of psychology known for her work on generational narcissism, has found that younger generations who have grown up immersed in social media tend to exhibit higher levels of narcissism and entitlement than previous generations. Twenge argues that the constant exposure to curated images of success and happiness on social media can lead to unrealistic expectations and a sense of inadequacy, which in turn fuels a desire for validation and attention. The implications of this narcissistic turn are far-reaching and deeply troubling. As we become increasingly focused on our own needs and desires, empathy and compassion begin to erode. Meaningful relationships suffer as we prioritize self-promotion over genuine connection. Social isolation and loneliness become rampant as individuals struggle to form authentic bonds based on mutual understanding and support. And perhaps most significantly, we lose the ability to confront and overcome adversity, becoming fragile and easily overwhelmed by life's inevitable challenges. Narcissism, in essence, prevents us from developing the resilience we need to navigate the complexities of life and find meaning in our suffering. We are so busy perfecting our image that we forget how to actually live. This then leads to the rise of victimhood culture, where individuals increasingly identify as victims and seek validation through claiming oppression or suffering, often without engaging in meaningful action or self-reflection. It becomes a perverse competition for who can claim the most victim status, further hindering the development of resilience and fostering a sense of entitlement. Are we becoming too fragile to face reality, so obsessed with our own narratives that we ignore anything that disrupts it? What is this doing to our societies? Think about it. Are you truly seeing yourself as you are or as you wish to be? If narcissism shields us from suffering, and suffering is essential for growth, how can we cultivate a more resilient and meaningful existence by embracing vulnerability and finding wisdom in difficult experiences? If narcissism shields us from suffering, and suffering is essential for growth, how can we cultivate a more resilient and meaningful existence by embracing vulnerability and finding wisdom in difficult experiences? Building on this idea of vulnerability as the gateway to authentic experience, we now arrive at a crucial juncture. If vulnerability inevitably exposes us to pain and suffering, how can we learn to navigate these difficult experiences and transform them into sources of strength, wisdom, and meaning? Suffering, in its various forms, is an unavoidable aspect of the human condition. From the minor setbacks and disappointments of daily life to the major crises and traumas that can shatter our world, suffering is woven into the fabric of existence. The attempt to avoid suffering at all costs, to create a smooth life, as Han describes, often leads to inauthenticity and a shallow existence. We become so focused on avoiding discomfort that we never truly engage with the world, never test our limits, and never discover our inner strength. It's as if we're trying to live in a bubble, protected from all harm, but in doing so, we also cut ourselves off from the very things that make life worth living. However, it's important to differentiate between unproductive suffering, which involves dwelling in negativity and wallowing in self-pity, and transformative suffering, which involves actively processing and learning from pain. The first reinforces stagnation, while the second fuels growth. Think of it like forging metal in fire. The metal must endure intense heat and pressure to become stronger and more durable. Similarly, we must confront our suffering, allow it to shape us, and emerge from the experience transformed. This process can lead to what psychologists call post-traumatic growth, a phenomenon where individuals experience positive psychological changes as a result of struggling with highly challenging life circumstances. Consider Viktor Frankl, the Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist who survived the horrors of Nazi concentration camps. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl recounts his experiences in Auschwitz and other camps, detailing the unimaginable suffering he and his fellow prisoners endured. Stripped of everything, including his possessions, his family, and even his name, Frankl found meaning in his suffering by focusing on his ability to choose his attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose his own way. He realized that even in the most dehumanizing conditions, he could still find purpose by helping others, by holding onto his inner values, and by envisioning a future beyond the camps. Frankl's experiences are a testament to the human spirit's capacity to find meaning even in the face of unimaginable suffering. Another powerful example is Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison for his activism against apartheid in South Africa. During his imprisonment, Mandela endured harsh conditions, isolation, and constant harassment. Yet, he never gave up hope, never wavered in his commitment to justice, and never allowed his suffering to embitter him. Instead, he used his time in prison to reflect on his experiences, to strengthen his resolve, and to develop a vision for a future South Africa free from racial discrimination. Upon his release, Mandela emerged as a symbol of hope and reconciliation, leading his country through a peaceful transition to democracy. And then there are countless, less famous examples of individuals who have transformed suffering into wisdom. People who have lost loved ones and started support groups to help others cope with grief. People who have battled addiction and become counselors to help others break free from its grip. People who have overcome personal tragedies and dedicated their lives to making a positive impact on the world. These stories are a testament to the power of the human spirit to find meaning and purpose, even in the darkest of times. Research on resilience also highlights the factors that contribute to the ability to bounce back from adversity, with many of these studies highlighting social support as a key factor. What then are the implications of finding meaning in suffering? For starters, increased resilience. By confronting our suffering and learning from it, we develop the ability to withstand future challenges. Greater empathy and compassion for others, because having experienced pain ourselves, we are better able to understand and connect with the pain of others. There is also a deeper appreciation for life. By recognizing the fragility and preciousness of existence, we learn to cherish each moment and to live more fully. And finally, a more profound sense of purpose. Suffering can clarify our values, help us identify our priorities, and inspire us to dedicate our lives to something greater than ourselves. But consider this. Can embracing suffering allow us to break free from the cycle of self-exploitation and cultivate a more authentic and meaningful existence, as Hans says we must? By acknowledging our pain, we reject the pressure to be perpetually happy and productive. By finding meaning in our struggles, we redefine success on our own terms. What lessons can suffering teach us that a smooth life can't? What strengths can we forge in the fires of adversity that we could never develop in the comfort of ease? Think about difficult experiences in your own life and consider how you might find meaning and growth in them. How has hardship shaped you? If embracing vulnerability and finding meaning in suffering are essential for personal growth, how can we cultivate the inner resources and practices that support these processes? What practical strategies can we adopt to build resilience and navigate the challenges of modern life? Building upon the transformative potential of suffering and its importance in discovering a more meaningful existence, we now arrive at a critical juncture. In a world obsessed with activity, how do we rediscover the lost art of contemplation and cultivate the inner stillness necessary for wisdom and well-being? Modern society, with its relentless demands and constant stimulation, has largely abandoned the practice of contemplation, a vital element for reclaiming inner stillness and counteracting the chaos of modern life. But what exactly is contemplation? It's more than just relaxation or entertainment. Contemplation is a form of deep, focused reflection that goes beyond mere mind wandering or passive consumption of media. It involves cultivating inner stillness, silence, and solitude, creating a space for deeper understanding and insight to emerge. Think of it as allowing the sediment of daily life to settle, revealing the clarity of the water beneath. Contemplation necessitates a deliberate detachment from the external world and a turning inward to explore the depths of one's own being. This isn't about escaping reality. It's about gaining a new perspective on it. Different forms of contemplation exist, such as meditation, prayer, mindful walking, or simply spending time in nature. What unites them is the intention to quiet the mind and open oneself to a deeper connection with oneself and the world around us. The writings of mystics and philosophers throughout history emphasize the importance of contemplation, and these practices have helped individuals access profound wisdom and insight. Think of Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk whose writings on contemplation continue to inspire seekers today, or Meister Eckhart, the medieval theologian who emphasized the importance of inner detachment. Contemplation has been valued throughout history in various cultures and spiritual traditions. For centuries, monks have sought solitude in monasteries, hermits have retreated to remote locations, and artists have withdrawn from the world to create their masterpieces. Consider the desert fathers of early Christianity, who sought silence and solitude in the Egyptian desert as a means of deepening their spiritual connection, or the Zen monks who practiced Zazen, a form of seated meditation, to cultivate mindfulness and inner peace. Scientists, too, sometimes use contemplative practices to enhance their creativity and intuition. There's evidence to suggest that Albert Einstein, for example, regularly engaged in thought experiments and periods of solitude to develop his theories. But where is the modern desert, the modern monastery, the modern mountaintop? Time use studies reveal a concerning trend, a decline in contemplative activities and a rise in time spent on screens. The average person spends hours each day scrolling through social media, watching television, or playing video games, activities that often leave us feeling more drained than refreshed. One recent study showed that adults spend an average of 6-5 hours per day looking at screens, and this average is growing every year. Contrast this with the monastic traditions of old, where a considerable portion of each day was dedicated to quiet reflection and prayer. There are, however, people who have incorporated contemplative practices into their daily lives and experienced positive effects on their mental and emotional well-being. These modern contemplatives have rediscovered the power of silence, and they use it to navigate the complexities of modern life. And then there's the rise of secular mindfulness practices, like mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, which makes ancient meditative techniques accessible to all, irrespective of belief or background. What are the implications of the decline of contemplation in modern society? Increased stress and anxiety, decreased creativity and innovation, a diminished sense of meaning and purpose, a greater susceptibility to manipulation by external forces. When we are constantly bombarded with information and stimulation, we lose the ability to think critically and to discern what is truly important. As Byung-Chul argues, the constant pressure to perform and optimize ourselves leaves us feeling exhausted and empty. Reclaiming the capacity for contemplation is a form of resistance against the demands of the performance society and a means of cultivating greater autonomy and inner peace. It allows us to step outside the cycle of constant activity and to reconnect with our inner selves. Contemplation isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for navigating the complexities of modern life and cultivating a more authentic and meaningful existence. Are we too busy to think? Have we become so addicted to activity that we've forgotten how to be still? If contemplation is essential for reclaiming inner stillness and finding meaning in a chaotic world, what specific practices and techniques can we adopt to cultivate this lost art and integrate it into our daily routines? What actionable steps can we take? Building upon the importance of contemplation as a tool for inner stillness, we now arrive at a critical question concerning the nature of modern freedom itself. In a world boasting limitless options, are we actually freer, or are we trapped by the very abundance that promises liberation? The modern world showers us with choices, from streaming services offering endless content to supermarkets overflowing with brands. We are told that this abundance equates to freedom, but could it be that this very excess is a source of our anxieties and burnout? Constant self-optimization, as we've explored, demands infinite choices, creating a cycle of evaluation and potential regret. So, are we truly liberated by having so many options, or are we simply overwhelmed? This brings us to the core idea of the paradox of choice. What is the paradox of choice? It describes the phenomenon where having too many options leads to analysis paralysis, regret, and ultimately dissatisfaction. This is in direct contrast to the traditional view of freedom, which equates the ability to choose with empowerment. Consider this. Traditional freedom implies that expanding options necessarily increases well-being. But is this always the case? This choice overload is a distinctly modern phenomenon, intricately woven into the fabric of capitalist structures, where the consumer is king, and the market caters to every conceivable desire. Think back to the 1950s. Grocery stores offered a limited array of products, perhaps a handful of cereal brands. Today, a single supermarket aisle can house hundreds of cereals, each promising unique benefits and flavors. Has this explosion of choice made us happier, or simply more confused? Barry Schwartz, in his book, The Paradox of Choice, meticulously details how an abundance of options often leads to decreased satisfaction. His research highlights the detrimental effects of choice overload on consumer behavior. Buyer's remorse, for example, becomes almost inevitable when faced with too many alternatives. Consider the realm of relationships. Dating apps, once hailed as revolutionary tools for finding love, now often lead to dating app fatigue. Countless profiles and superficial connections leave individuals feeling more lost than ever. And what about career paths? The modern worker, no longer bound to a single profession for life, now faces a bewildering array of job opportunities. This can lead to constant job hopping, a perpetual search for something better that rarely ends in true fulfillment. Think about the last time you spent an hour scrolling through Netflix, only to end up watching nothing. Or perhaps you agonized over choosing a restaurant, only to be disappointed with your selection. These seemingly trivial examples highlight the pervasive nature of the paradox of choice. Studies reveal a direct correlation between increased decision-making and increased anxiety levels. This paradox, this overwhelming abundance, directly contributes to overwhelm, anxiety, and that nagging feeling of FOMO, the fear of missing out. We feel compelled to research and optimize every single choice, from the mundane to the momentous, in order to avoid potential regret. What does this constant evaluation do to our ability to simply enjoy the moment? The sheer volume of options erodes our ability to authentically experience life. We never fully commit to one option, always wondering if there's something better just around the corner. We are trapped in a state of perpetual optionality, never truly present or fully engaged. So, I ask you, do you spend more time choosing than enjoying? Are you so focused on maximizing your options that you are missing the richness of the present moment? If the illusion of choice contributes to anxieties and burnout, how do we regain control and live intentionally amidst endless possibilities? How can we curate our lives, not by maximizing options, but by embracing constraints and cultivating a deeper sense of purpose. What if true freedom isn't about having unlimited choices, but about having the wisdom to choose what truly matters? If the sheer volume of choices paralyzes us, is the answer to ruthlessly eliminate the non-essential, or does this pursuit of simplification risk becoming another form of self-imposed pressure? This brings us to a critical juncture in our exploration of modern life and its discontents. We've seen how the relentless pursuit of self-optimization, fueled by limitless options, can lead to burnout and anxiety. Now, we must ask, does essentialism, the art of doing less, truly offer a path to genuine freedom? Or does it simply repackage the performance society's demands into a more minimalist aesthetic? We are constantly told to optimize ourselves, but this constant pressure creates rising rates of anxiety and depression. The key to understanding how to escape the trap of modern life is to first examine the philosophy of essentialism. What then is essentialism? In its simplest form, essentialism is a philosophy and practice of identifying and prioritizing the truly vital aspects of life, while consciously eliminating everything else. What this means is ruthlessly focusing your time and energy on what aligns with your values and brings you the most joy, fulfillment, and purpose. In other words, it is intentionally limiting your options. In a world of endless possibilities, essentialism offers a seemingly liberating antidote to choice paralysis. But is this a legitimate answer or another problem? It is crucial to distinguish between healthy essentialism and its toxic counterpart. Healthy essentialism is marked by intentionality, mindfulness, and self-compassion, while toxic essentialism manifests as obsessive pruning, rigidity, and self-judgment. The core principle of essentialism, as articulated by Greg McKeown in his book Essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less, is less but better. It is about consciously choosing where to focus your energy and resources, instead of spreading yourself thin across countless endeavors. In essence, essentialism aims to combat choice paralysis and analysis fatigue by simplifying decision-making processes and focusing energy on what truly matters. Think of it like minimalism, but applied to your life. But is essentialism and minimalism really a path to freedom? For example, consider Steve Jobs' laser-like focus on a few key products at Apple. By ruthlessly eliminating distractions and prioritizing simplicity, Jobs transformed Apple into one of the most innovative and valuable companies in the world. His single-minded dedication to design and user experience serves as a potent example of essentialist principles in action. But what about the dark side of this obsession? Research around essentialism and its impact on productivity, creativity, and overall well-being reveals a similar pattern. Studies suggest that individuals who practice essentialism experience increased focus, reduced stress, and greater satisfaction in their chosen pursuits. However, the dark side of essentialism emerges when individuals become overly rigid or dogmatic in their pursuit of simplification. Think about Marie Kondo and the criticism that her famous method has become too extreme for some. The relentless pursuit of decluttering and tidying can, ironically, become a source of anxiety and self-judgment. One instance of this is the extreme minimalist who alienates loved ones through their lifestyle choices. Imagine an individual who discards sentimental items, cancels social engagements, and isolates themselves in their pursuit of a minimalist lifestyle. Their relationships suffer, their emotional well-being deteriorates, and their quest for simplification ultimately leads to a life of isolation and regret. So what does this tell us about the limits of essentialism? This means that essentialism can be a powerful tool for reclaiming agency in a world of overwhelming choices, but only if practiced with mindfulness and self-compassion. The implication of this is crucial, because unless we are careful, we might turn essentialism into another form of self-optimization and control, where the pressure to eliminate the non-essential becomes a source of anxiety and self-judgment. We must emphasize the importance of aligning essentialist principles with personal values and finding a sustainable balance between focus and flexibility. Have you ever noticed this in your own life? Have you ever found yourself so focused on optimizing one area of your life that you neglected others? I would encourage you to reflect on your own relationship with essentialism. Are you simplifying your life or simply adding another layer of pressure? Furthermore, who are you doing this for? Are you driven by your own values or by cultural expectations around productivity and achievement? These are difficult questions to ask, and even more difficult to answer. But that's not all, because if both limitless choice and ruthless simplification can lead to burnout and self-exploitation, where do we find genuine freedom and meaning in modern life? If the performance society demands constant optimization, and essentialism risks becoming another tool of self-control, is there an alternative? Is there a way to live authentically and with purpose, without succumbing to the pressures of modern life? Now let's look at what Byung-Chul might have to say about this modern phenomenon. If essentialism risks becoming another tool for self-control, does it also, inadvertently, diminish our capacity for experiencing the world with passion and desire? Has our relentless pursuit of optimization and efficiency extinguished the very spark of eros, leaving us emotionally barren despite our carefully curated lives? The cost of productivity may be far greater than we imagined. What then is eros, and why is its potential decline so concerning? Eros, in its truest sense, is far more than just sexual desire. It's a vital life force, an insatiable hunger for connection, creativity, and genuine experience. It's the wellspring of our passion, the fuel for our artistic expression, and the driving force behind our most meaningful relationships. Think of it as the opposite of apathy. Now contrast this with the modern focus on efficiency, which relentlessly values quantifiable results over the messy, unpredictable nature of experience. Self-improvement in its most misguided form becomes a performance, a constant striving to meet external standards, rather than an exploration of our inner selves. But here's the rub. Fear of vulnerability, the very foundation of self-improvement, can stifle eros, leading to emotional numbness and a profound sense of disconnection. What this ultimately means is that we are disconnecting from our desires. Consider the evidence of eros's decline in our modern society. Look at the rise of hookup culture, where intimacy is often reduced to a transactional exchange devoid of genuine emotional connection. Or consider the commodification of sex, where bodies are objectified and relationships are reduced to a series of fleeting encounters. What about the prevalence of pornography and its impact on our ability to form authentic bonds? And what do you make of the instant gratification offered by dating apps, which fosters a culture of disposability, where partners are easily replaced with the swipe of a finger? Presenting data on decreasing marriage rates and increasing loneliness only underscores this disturbing trend. The relentless pursuit of efficiency and optimization has bled into our personal lives. In emotional capitalism, sociologist Eva Illouz argues that our emotions themselves have become commodified, shaped by market forces and used to drive consumption. Have you noticed how advertisements often try to sell you not just a product, but a feeling, an experience, a lifestyle? The implications of this death of eros are far-reaching. When passion and desire wane, so too does our capacity for creativity, empathy, and the ability to connect meaningfully with others. This creates increased alienation and a pervasive sense of despair. What does this look like in practice? This contributes to what Byung-Chul describes as the burnout society, where the loss of eros fuels rising rates of depression, anxiety, and even suicide. We are simply trying to function and optimize in this world. Are we settling for a life devoid of genuine passion, trading authentic connection for fleeting moments of pleasure and validation? Does our society push us to seek superficial success or amass hollow followers instead of nurturing our inner flame? If the death of Eros leaves us disconnected and depleted, how can we find meaning in a world that seems to lack wonder? Is there a path to reclaim our life force, reignite our passions, and cultivate genuine joy in a world that often feels cold and clinical? Stay with me, because the answer may lie in embracing the very qualities our performance-driven society seeks to suppress. If the death of Eros leaves us disconnected and depleted, how can we find meaning in a world that seems to lack wonder? Is there a path to reclaim our life force, reignite our passions, and cultivate genuine joy in a world that often feels cold and clinical? Stay with me, because the answer may lie in embracing the very qualities our performance-driven society seeks to suppress. But consider this: has modern life become a relentless performance, where genuine experience is replaced by curated images for consumption? Referencing the previous section, we can't truly be in our bodies if we're constantly stuck in our minds. Let's explore Guy Debord's concept of the society of the spectacle and connect it to Byung-Chul Han's ideas on transparency and performance. Debord argued that modern society has become a spectacle, a social relationship mediated by images, where appearances become more important than reality. It's not just about what we see, but what we do. Contrast this with authentic experience, which gets replaced by its representation and commodification. It's the tourist who visits a place solely to take a photo for social media, rather than truly experiencing it. Think about it. The relentless pursuit of the perfect Instagram shot often overshadows the actual moment, turning experiences into mere content for consumption. Consider the pervasiveness of the spectacle in modern life. Social media platforms are curated realities, with users presenting idealized versions of themselves. Advertising manipulates our desires, creating a constant sense of lack and the need to acquire more. Experiences themselves are commodified, packaged, and sold as products for consumption. Think of reality TV shows, which present staged and often manipulated scenarios as authentic representations of life. And what about political rallies that are carefully choreographed for media coverage, prioritizing image over substance? Naomi Klein's No Logo brilliantly dissected how brands create identities and lifestyles that consumers buy into, further blurring the lines between reality and representation. Data suggests that the average person is exposed to thousands of images daily, a constant barrage that shapes our perceptions and desires and warps our expectations. What does this constant exposure do to our internal self-concept? The society of the spectacle contributes significantly to self-exploitation, alienation, and a profound loss of meaning. The pressure to constantly perform for others erodes our authentic selfhood, leaving us feeling like mere actors on a stage. Are we living our lives, or are we performing for an audience? The spectacle creates a fake sense of bonding, a superficial connection based on shared images rather than genuine empathy and understanding. This constant performance becomes exhausting, leading to burnout and a sense of emptiness. What happens when the likes stop coming? If the society of the spectacle alienates us from ourselves, what can we do to reconnect with our bodies and reclaim our authentic experience in a world dominated by images? How can we get out of our heads and back into our bodies? In a world increasingly mediated by images and technology, how can we reclaim our embodied experience and cultivate a deeper connection with our physical selves? This brings us to the idea of the body as a site of resistance against the disembodying forces of the spectacle, a direct link back to the death of Eros and the critical need for passion in our lives. Reconnecting with the body is essential for reclaiming our humanity. This involves cultivating practices like mindfulness, movement, and sensory awareness. Embodied cognition suggests that our physical experiences shape our thoughts and emotions, highlighting the interconnectedness of mind and body. Contrast this with the disembodied nature of online interactions, where we often exist as mere avatars, detached from our physical sensations and emotions. The spectacle prioritizes image over substance, further disconnecting us from our embodied reality. The body is a feeling vehicle, not a thinking vehicle. Consider what happens when we turn off our five senses. The deprivation can lead to new insights and a deeper appreciation for the physical world. But can the reverse also be true? Practices like yoga, dance, and martial arts can help us reconnect with our bodies through movement and awareness. Nature walks and mindful eating engage our senses and ground us in the present moment. Sensory deprivation, paradoxically, can heighten our awareness of our physical sensations. Consider grounding or earthing practices, which involve direct contact with the Earth's surface and are said to have numerous health benefits. What if they simply pull us out of the digital world and back into our physical selves? Think about individuals who have experienced the transformative power of reconnecting with their bodies, finding a renewed sense of vitality, presence, and connection. Research consistently demonstrates the benefits of physical activity and mindfulness for both mental and physical health, and yet society continues to push for more thinking and less feeling. Reclaiming embodied experience has profound implications. It increases self-awareness, improves emotional regulation, fosters a greater sense of presence and connection, and serves as a powerful form of resistance against the disembodying forces of the spectacle. How can you bring more awareness and presence to your physical sensations and movements in your daily life? This also gives you power over those who are disembodied. By grounding yourself in your physical reality, you become less susceptible to manipulation and control. If reconnecting with our bodies is essential for reclaiming authentic experience, how can we cultivate the inner stillness and solitude necessary for deeper self-reflection and resistance against the demands of the performance society? How can we find true connection in a hyper-connected world? Building upon the previous section's focus on embodiment and inner stillness, we must consider the concept of the digital Sabbath as a practical strategy for resisting the relentless demands of the performance society. In a hyper-connected world, how can we intentionally disconnect from technology and create space for reflection, connection, and authentic experience? Related to the previous section, you cannot be in your body if you are always on. The digital Sabbath is a regular period of time, perhaps one day a week or a few hours each evening, during which we intentionally abstain from using digital devices. The purpose of this intentional disconnection is to reduce stress and anxiety, improve focus and concentration, cultivate inner stillness, and reconnect with ourselves and others. It is not a forced disconnection resulting from burnout or technology addiction, but a deliberate choice to reclaim our time and attention. Think back to what the world was like before technology consumed our lives, when conversations were face-to-face and solitude was a cherished experience. What was lost when we gained constant connectivity? Consider individuals and communities that have successfully incorporated digital Sabbaths into their lives, finding a renewed sense of peace, connection, and purpose. Research consistently shows the benefits of taking breaks from technology, including improved sleep, reduced stress, and increased creativity. Remember those who have gone off the grid, choosing a life of simplicity and self-sufficiency over the constant stimulation of the digital world. The Old Order Amish offer an extreme example, rejecting many modern technologies in favor of a simpler, more community-oriented way of life, and it seems to be working for them. Practicing a digital Sabbath has far-reaching implications. It reduces self-exploitation and the pressures of the performance society, fostering a greater sense of autonomy and control over one's time and attention. It also deepens relationships with ourselves and others, and cultivates a greater capacity for contemplation and self-reflection. What specific times and activities could you designate as technology-free zones in your own life? By intentionally disconnecting, we can begin to reconnect with what truly matters. But is this really enough? If the digital Sabbath can help us disconnect from the demands of the performance society, how can we cultivate a broader sense of community and connection that transcends the superficiality of online interactions and fosters genuine human relationships? How do we move from hyperconnection to true connection? If reconnecting with our bodies is essential for reclaiming authentic experience, how can we cultivate the inner stillness and solitude necessary for deeper self-reflection and resistance against the demands of the performance society? How do we move from hyperconnection to true connection? In a world of unprecedented digital connectivity, why are so many people feeling more isolated and alone than ever before? The human animal is a social animal, and yet modern society seems to be pushing us further apart. Let's define community as a group of people who share common values, interests, or goals, and who engage in meaningful interactions and mutual support. What distinguishes this from the superficial connections often found on social media, where relationships can feel transactional and fleeting? Consider how the rise of individualism and consumerism has eroded traditional forms of community, and the difference between online community and embodied community, where physical presence and shared experiences strengthen bonds. Has something essential been lost in the transition? Statistics paint a concerning picture of the decline of community involvement in modern society. Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone documented the decline in civic engagement in America, noting decreased participation in everything from bowling leagues to parent-teacher associations. This trend has continued, with studies showing a correlation between increased social media use and feelings of loneliness and isolation. One study showed that individuals who spend more than 2 hours a day on social media are twice as likely to report feeling socially isolated. Think about those individuals who feel isolated despite having hundreds or thousands of online friends, their feeds filled with curated images of seemingly perfect lives. What happens when the likes and comments don't fill the void? What happens when there is no third place? The implications of this crisis of community are far-reaching. Increased rates of depression and anxiety, a decline in social trust, a greater susceptibility to manipulation and division, and a loss of the sense of belonging and purpose that comes from being part of something larger than oneself. Byung-Chul Han's critique of the performance society argues that the relentless pursuit of individual success leaves little time or energy for cultivating meaningful relationships and contributing to the common good. Are people treating others as a means to an end, viewing relationships as transactional opportunities rather than sources of genuine connection? Are we so busy performing our lives that we've forgotten how to truly live them alongside others? If technology contributes to the crisis of community, how can we consciously use technology to cultivate authentic connection and strengthen our relationships with others? Can we find a path back to genuine human interaction in the digital age? Stay with me as we now examine a different side of the coin. Can we leverage digital tools to foster deeper connection, or are they inherently corrosive to authentic relationships? The paradox of technology is that it simultaneously connects and isolates us. What if we could intentionally use it to build better relationships? In this burnout society, a supportive community might just be what saves us. True relationships necessitate vulnerability and presence. It is here that we must contrast connection with networking, with the latter often being transactional, focused on what each party can gain. Relationships need work and cannot be maintained passively. They require empathy, active listening, and shared experiences. The philosopher Martin Buber, in his book I and Thou, described two fundamental ways that human beings can relate to one another. In an I-it relationship, we treat others as objects, as means to an end, while in an I-thou relationship, we encounter others as whole, unique beings, fostering a connection based on mutual respect and genuine understanding. Which type of relationship predominates our digital interactions? There are countless stories from people who intentionally use technology to enhance relationships. Think of those who use video calls to stay connected with distant family, organizing online groups based on shared interests, and using collaborative platforms for creative projects. The concept of slow communication contrasts the quick texts with thoughtful letter writing, digital or physical. While a text is quick and easy, a letter requires time, effort, and vulnerability, communicating a deeper level of care and commitment. Studies consistently show that shared experiences strengthen bonds. Think about those who go to concerts for the music versus those who film everything for social media. Which group is more likely to have a richer, more meaningful experience? Now consider the old order Amish, who carefully select which technologies to adopt in order to support their community values and maintain strong social bonds. The key here is intentionality. Consciously used technology can support connection, but can't replace embodied interactions. Over-reliance on technology to maintain relationships often leads to superficiality and performative connection. Remember, tech should facilitate, not substitute, authentic human connection. Are we confusing contact with connection, mistaking the constant stream of digital interactions for genuine relationships? If we are constantly distracted by our devices, can we ever truly be present for the people in our lives? If we can consciously cultivate genuine relationships using technology, what are the key practices and philosophies that allow us to maintain a sense of purpose and navigate the inherent challenges of modern existence? What if the key to living a more fulfilling life lies not in acquiring more, but in appreciating what we already have? In a society that constantly bombards us with messages of more, better, and faster, can we find contentment and freedom by embracing the philosophy of enough? The curated living, choice overload, loss of eros, hyperconnection, and dwindling communities all speak to a society that is perpetually chasing something just out of reach. What if rejecting the pursuit of limitless actually unlocks more meaningful experiences? Let's define enough as a conscious rejection of the relentless pursuit of more, and a deliberate embrace of contentment, gratitude, and simplicity. This is not settling for mediocrity or lacking ambition. It's about aligning our desires with our values and recognizing when we have enough to live a fulfilling life. Practices like minimalism, simple living, and conscious consumption are all expressions of this philosophy. But enough is a subjective state, defined by personal values, not external metrics. What is enough for one person may not be enough for another, and that's okay. What truly matters is that we define it for ourselves, rather than letting society define it for us. Throughout history, there have been cultures and communities that valued simplicity and contentment over material wealth. The Amish, with their commitment to simple living and community, offer a compelling example. Certain indigenous tribes have maintained a deep connection to nature and a sustainable way of life for centuries. Monastic traditions, found in various religions, often emphasize detachment from material possessions as a path to spiritual enlightenment. Philosophical texts on contentment abound, from the Stoics, who advocated for virtue and acceptance of what we cannot control, to the Buddhists, who teach the path to enlightenment through detachment from desire. Research consistently demonstrates a strong correlation between gratitude and happiness. Think about those people who have intentionally downsized their lives and experienced increased well-being, finding freedom from the burden of possessions and the constant need for more. Byung-Chul argues that the pursuit of endless accumulation leads to a state of constant dissatisfaction, while embracing enough allows us to appreciate the present moment and cultivate inner peace. The philosophy of enough undermines self-exploitation, helps us resist the tyranny of positivity, combat the illusion of choice, and fuels true connection. In a world that profits on our dissatisfaction, embracing enough is a radical act of self-empowerment. Where can you embrace enough in your life, and how might that change your relationship with society? By consciously choosing to want what we have, rather than constantly chasing what we lack, we reclaim agency and find contentment in the present moment. But the question remains, is this shift in perspective enough to truly transform our lives? If embracing enough is crucial for living an authentic and meaningful life, what overarching framework can guide our choices and actions, allowing us to resist the pressures of the performance society and cultivate a more fulfilling existence? Stay with me, because we're about to explore the most powerful tool of all. In a world that prizes speed above all else, can we find greater fulfillment and meaning by embracing the wisdom of slowness? The performance society demands constant optimization, but what if true flourishing lies in resisting this relentless pursuit? Let's define slowness, not merely as physical slowness, but as a mindful approach to life that prioritizes depth, reflection, and presence over speed and efficiency. Think of slowness not merely as physical slowness or laziness. Consider it a conscious choice to savor experiences, cultivate deeper connections, and engage in meaningful activities without rushing. This stands in stark contrast to the frenetic pace of modern life, where multitasking, instant gratification, and constant stimulation are the norm. Think about the slow movement, slow food, slow cities, etc., as tangible examples of this philosophy. This movement advocates for a more leisurely and deliberate approach to various aspects of life, from eating and traveling to working and raising children. The movement arose because the performance society often misses the point entirely. Embracing slowness can enhance many aspects of life: mindful eating, savoring each bite and appreciating the flavors; deep work, focusing intensely on a single task without distractions; slow travel, immersing oneself in the local culture and connecting with people on a deeper level; and deliberate communication, listening attentively and responding thoughtfully. Research on the benefits of mindfulness consistently shows that regular mindfulness practice can reduce stress, improve cognitive function, and increase overall well-being. Studies at UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center have found that even short periods of mindfulness meditation can significantly lower cortisol levels, the hormone associated with stress. Consider the lives of individuals who have intentionally slowed down their lives and experienced increased well-being. Artists who dedicate themselves to mastering their craft, writers who prioritize depth over output, and entrepreneurs who build businesses with sustainable practices. The scientific understanding of flow state, a state of deep absorption and effortless action, relies on concentrated focus and a deliberate slowing down of mental processes. Highlight the artistic movement of slow cinema, which emphasizes long takes, minimal dialogue, and contemplative pacing to create a more immersive and thought-provoking viewing experience. What does all this tell us about slowness? Embracing slowness allows us to resist self-exploitation, cultivate a greater appreciation for the present moment, and deepen our connections with ourselves and others. This is a form of resistance against the relentless demands of the performance society. By consciously choosing to slow down, we reclaim our time, attention, and autonomy, finding freedom from the tyranny of the to-do list. Think about the relentless pursuit of efficiency, how it often leads to burnout and a sense of emptiness. What if the key to true productivity lies not in doing more, but in doing less more mindfully? Reflect on areas of your life where you could benefit from slowing down. What activities could you approach with more patience and attention? Are you a human being or a human doing? If embracing slowness is essential for reclaiming our time and attention, how can we cultivate the inner stillness and solitude necessary for deeper self-reflection and resistance against the demands of the performance society? How can we find true connection in a hyper-connected world? In a world saturated with noise and distraction, how can we cultivate the art of deep listening and connect with others on a more meaningful level? The ability to truly hear others may just be the superpower that will save us. Let's define deep listening as a practice that involves paying full attention to the speaker, suspending judgment, and seeking to understand their perspective without interrupting or formulating a response. It's not just about hearing the words, but about understanding the emotions, intentions, and unspoken messages behind them. Contrast this with active listening, which still involves formulating a response, or simply waiting for one's turn to speak. What separates deep listening from merely tolerating someone's voice? When we truly listen, we create a space for genuine connection and understanding to flourish. It also entails empathy, vulnerability, and creating a safe space for open communication. The neurological effect of really paying attention to someone is significant. Studies have shown that when we listen attentively, our brains synchronize with the speaker's brain, creating a sense of shared experience and understanding. Deep listening can improve relationships, resolve conflicts, and foster greater understanding in various contexts. Personal relationships, strengthening bonds and building trust. Professional settings, improving collaboration and productivity. And political discourse, bridging divides and fostering empathy. Research consistently demonstrates the benefits of active listening for communication and empathy. Studies at the University of California, Berkeley, have found that individuals who practice active listening are more likely to be perceived as empathetic and understanding by others. Think about transformative power of being truly heard and understood. Consider the stories of individuals who have overcome trauma or adversity through the support of a compassionate listener. There are techniques for improving listening skills, such as mindfulness meditation, cultivating present moment awareness, and nonviolent communication, expressing needs and feelings without judgment. Think of political leaders who have used deep listening to bridge divides and foster understanding. Nelson Mandela, for example, was known for his ability to listen attentively to his opponents, seeking to understand their perspectives and find common ground. Cultivating deep listening strengthens relationships, reduces conflict, increases empathy and compassion, fosters a greater sense of connection, and enables a more meaningful contribution to the world. Deep listening provides more understanding, which makes it harder to exploit others. Byung-Chul argues that the performance society, with its emphasis on efficiency and output, often neglects the importance of deep listening, leading to superficial communication and a breakdown of trust. Reflect on your own listening habits. Are you truly hearing others, or are you just waiting to speak? If cultivating deep listening strengthens our connections with others, how can we simultaneously cultivate a healthy relationship with solitude, allowing us to recharge, reflect, and access our inner wisdom? What if our greatest strength lies not in constant connection, but in the ability to find peace and clarity within ourselves? In an age of relentless connectivity and social pressure, how can we embrace the sacredness of solitude and find strength, creativity, and self-understanding in moments of stillness? The world bombards us with noise. Sometimes what we need is a silent retreat. It's not loneliness, it's aloneness. Solitude is a positive state of intentional aloneness, where we can disconnect from external distractions and connect with our inner selves. It provides space for reflection, examining our thoughts and feelings, self-discovery, uncovering our values and purpose, creativity, generating new ideas and insights, and spiritual growth, cultivating a deeper connection with something larger than ourselves. Solitude can help us cultivate a stronger sense of self, independent of external validation or approval. Think about how constant connectivity can erode our sense of self, leading us to define ourselves by external metrics and the opinions of others. Relate it to the concept of autonomy. Erich Fromm defined autonomy as the ability to think for oneself, to make independent decisions, and to take responsibility for one's own life. Solitude is essential for cultivating autonomy, as it allows us to break free from the influence of external pressures and develop our own internal compass. Consider the writings of authors who valued solitude, such as Thoreau, who retreated to Walden Pond to live deliberately, and Virginia Woolf, who emphasized the importance of a room of one's own for female writers. Throughout history, solitude has been valued in various cultures and spiritual traditions. Think about practices like retreats, periods of withdrawal from the world for spiritual renewal, silent meditation, cultivating inner stillness through focused attention, and nature walks, connecting with the natural world in a solitary setting. Consider those individuals who have found strength, clarity, or inspiration in solitude. Scientists who make breakthroughs while working alone, artists who create masterpieces in quiet studios, and activists who find the courage to stand up for their beliefs after moments of reflection. How did the pandemic, despite its hardships, provide unexpected solitude for some? For many, the lockdowns and social distancing measures created an opportunity to disconnect from the hustle and bustle of daily life and reconnect with themselves. Embracing solitude increases self-awareness, understanding our thoughts, feelings, and motivations, improves emotional regulation, managing our emotions effectively, fosters greater creativity and innovation, generating new ideas and insights, cultivates a stronger sense of purpose, aligning our lives with our values, and increases resistance to the pressures of conformity, standing up for what we believe in. Solitude helps us resist the constant pressure to conform to societal norms and expectations, allowing us to cultivate our own unique identities and live authentically. Byung-Chul Han's critique of the performance society highlights how the constant pressure to achieve and perform leaves little room for solitude, leading to a loss of self and a sense of emptiness. Reflect on your own relationship with solitude. Do you fear it or embrace it? When was the last time you were alone with your thoughts, without any distractions? Consider how the ability to be alone comfortably is linked to self-acceptance. If we cannot tolerate our own company, it may be a sign that we are not fully accepting ourselves. If intentional disconnection, empathy, solitude, and self-compassion are so powerful, what broader shifts, strategies, or worldviews can we implement to promote societal well-being? How do we collectively create a world where inner peace is valued over outward performance? In a world that constantly demands our attention and energy, how can we create a personal sanctuary where we can recharge, reflect, and connect with our true selves? Isn't it paradoxical that our modern lives, filled with so many supposed conveniences, often leave us feeling more depleted than ever? Han's critique of constant connectivity suggests that we've lost touch with inner stillness. Is a personal sanctuary, then, not just a luxury, but a necessity in our modern lives? Let's define sanctuary as a physical or mental space intentionally designed to be free from external pressures, distractions, and judgment. What does that really entail? It's a place, physical or mental, characterized by safety, peace, quiet, and authenticity, starkly contrasting with the chaotic and overstimulating environment of modern life. This sanctuary could be a physical space, a quiet room, a serene garden, or a secluded spot in nature. It could also be a mental space, a state of mindfulness achieved through meditation, a set of personal rituals that ground us, or a community of like-minded friends who offer unconditional support. And it is important to consider it as it relates to the idea of boundaries. Unlike a safe space, which can sometimes be interpreted as an environment free from any challenge or discomfort, a sanctuary is a space for authentic self-expression, even if that expression involves vulnerability, discomfort, or even pain. A sanctuary is not about escaping reality, but about strengthening ourselves to face it. Throughout history, individuals have sought refuge in sanctuaries of various forms. Think of monastic cells, where monks dedicate themselves to prayer and contemplation, or writers' studios, where authors create worlds with their words. Consider meditation gardens, carefully designed to promote inner peace, or artists' retreats, where creators can immerse themselves in their craft without distraction. Even nature preserves can function as sanctuaries, offering a respite from the noise and pollution of urban life. Creating a sanctuary has tangible psychological benefits, including reduced stress, increased creativity, improved self-awareness, and a greater sense of peace and well-being. Research on the impact of physical environments on mental health consistently shows that exposure to nature and quiet spaces can lower cortisol levels and improve mood. There's also the concept of hermiting, a temporary withdrawal from society for the purpose of self-reflection and renewal. Hermits throughout history have often found profound insights and spiritual growth through periods of solitude and contemplation. Building a sanctuary, therefore, is an act of resisting self-exploitation, reclaiming agency, cultivating authenticity, and fostering a deeper connection with oneself. In what ways can building your own sanctuary be an act of rebellion? Hand's critique of the performance society highlights the relentless demands of constant productivity and optimization. Creating a sanctuary, whether it's a physical space, a mental practice, or a combination of both, becomes an act of defiance against these demands. What would your personal sanctuary include? How would you protect it? And how could this concept extend to online spaces, creating intentional communities of support and authenticity? Remember, the modern equivalent of a town square can be a Discord server. If creating a sanctuary is essential for cultivating authenticity and resisting the pressures of modern life, how can we protect this sanctuary from the external forces that threaten to invade and disrupt it? How can we maintain its integrity and ensure that it remains a source of strength and renewal? A sanctuary is only as good as its protection, isn't it? Once we've created a sacred space for ourselves, how do we guard the gates and prevent the forces of the performance society from infiltrating and undermining its integrity? It's a constant battle, isn't it? The outside world never sleeps, and it's constantly vying for our attention and energy. Let's consider the various ways in which a sanctuary can be invaded. Technological distractions are a major culprit. The constant notifications from our phones, the endless scroll of social media, the allure of the internet. Social obligations, while often fulfilling, can also drain our energy and encroach upon our time for reflection. Work demands can creep into our personal lives, blurring the boundaries between productivity and rest. Even negative emotions such as anxiety, self-doubt, and self-criticism can infiltrate our mental sanctuary, poisoning our inner peace. So how do we fight back? Setting boundaries, both physical and mental, is essential for protecting our sanctuary from these intrusions. This might involve turning off notifications during certain hours, saying no to requests that overextend us, practicing mindfulness to quiet the inner critic, and cultivating self-compassion to weather difficult emotions. It's almost as if we need to develop a mental immune system to ward off these invasions. Throughout history, individuals have employed various strategies to protect their sanctuaries. Think of artists who fiercely guard their creative time, refusing to be interrupted during their work hours. Consider writers who disconnect from the internet to focus on their writing, or individuals who prioritize self-care and set clear boundaries with others. Research on the importance of boundaries for mental health and well-being consistently shows that individuals who set healthy boundaries experience lower levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. What about those who struggle with boundary setting? It often stems from a fear of disappointing others, a desire to be liked, or a belief that we must always be available and productive. Overcoming this requires a conscious effort to prioritize our own needs and to recognize that saying no is an act of self-preservation, not selfishness. There's the concept of radical self-reliance, which encourages individuals to take responsibility for their own well-being and to set clear boundaries with others. It's the realization that nobody else will guard our gates if we don't. Protecting one's sanctuary leads to increased focus and productivity, improved emotional regulation, stronger relationships, and a greater sense of autonomy and control over one's life. It's a virtuous cycle, isn't it? Hand's critique of the performance society highlights how the constant pressure to achieve and perform leaves little room for self-care and boundary setting. Therefore, protecting one's sanctuary is an act of self-preservation, a necessary step towards reclaiming our agency and resisting the demands of constant productivity. But we must be realistic. What specific forces threaten your sanctuary? What are your triggers that make it easier for you to allow your sanctuary to be invaded? What are your tells, those subtle signs that you're starting to compromise your boundaries? If protecting our sanctuaries requires constant vigilance and effort, how can we ensure that these spaces remain authentic and true to ourselves, rather than becoming just another performance or a reflection of external pressures? How can we ensure that the sanctuary does not become performative? After all, it is very easy to start performing for an audience of one, yourself. How can we ensure that our personal sanctuaries remain true to ourselves and resist the temptation to curate or optimize them for external validation? Is it even possible that we might perform, even when alone? The modern world has a way of creeping into every corner of our lives, even the spaces we intend to be sacred. The key lies in self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-compassion. What does it mean to be truly self-aware within our sanctuary? It means recognizing our own tendencies to compare ourselves to others, to seek external validation, or to try to meet unrealistic expectations, even in a space that's meant to be safe. A true sanctuary is a space for vulnerability, imperfection, and honest self-expression. We need to be willing to embrace our flaws and to allow ourselves to be seen, both by ourselves and by others, without judgment. Remember, even the desire to create the perfect sanctuary can become a form of performance, driven by the need to impress ourselves or others. Can this bleed into any space? Consider those who curate perfect lives online, showcasing idyllic homes, flawless bodies, and seemingly effortless success. Yet behind the facade, they may be struggling with anxiety, loneliness, and a deep sense of emptiness. Contrast this with examples of people who live authentically, even if it means being vulnerable, imperfect, and sometimes messy. These individuals may not have the perfect lives, but they possess a sense of inner peace and contentment that is far more valuable than any external validation. Strategies for cultivating self-awareness and self-compassion are varied, including journaling, meditation, therapy, and spending time in nature. The simple act of writing down our thoughts and feelings can help us to identify patterns, triggers, and underlying beliefs that may be sabotaging our efforts to create an authentic sanctuary. Maintaining authenticity within one's sanctuary leads to a deeper sense of self-acceptance, improved emotional regulation, stronger relationships, greater creativity, and a more meaningful existence. Do we truly benefit from these, or do we just tell ourselves that? Hand's critique of the performance society highlights how the constant pressures of conformity and self-optimization can erode our sense of self, leading us to live inauthentically and to prioritize external validation over inner peace. To live authentically is to resist these pressures, to embrace our unique selves, and to create a sanctuary that reflects our true values and desires. But consider this. Are you presenting a curated version of yourself, even when alone? Where can you embrace greater vulnerability and self-acceptance? Is it possible that society doesn't actually benefit when we embrace authenticity? After all, it's much easier to control people who are constantly seeking external validation. If these spaces are so important to maintain and so difficult to safeguard, what does this say about our lives outside of them? Is all lost? Or are there changes that we can promote that will protect our sanctuaries from having to be so fiercely guarded? While we've explored the vital importance of creating and maintaining personal sanctuaries, those spaces of refuge and authenticity, a crucial question remains. While personal sanctuaries and individual practices are essential, can we truly thrive in a society that inherently fosters self-exploitation and burnout? Even the most carefully guarded sanctuary is ultimately vulnerable to the pressures and demands of the world outside, isn't it? What systemic changes can we promote to create a society that supports well-being for all, rather than placing the burden solely on individuals? Let's define systemic change, not as mere tinkering around the edges, but as a fundamental shift in the underlying structures, policies, and cultural norms that shape our lives. Contrast this sharply with individualistic solutions, which often focus on self-improvement, personal responsibility, and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. While individual efforts are undeniably valuable, even essential, are they truly sufficient to address the root causes of self-exploitation and burnout? Or are they merely treating the symptoms of a deeper malaise? Think of it like this. Imagine a polluted river causing widespread illness. Individual solutions would be like handing out water filters to everyone. Systemic change, on the other hand, would be like cleaning up the source of the pollution, preventing the illness from occurring in the first place. One bails water, the other cleans the river. A healthy society, then, would be one that prioritizes social support, economic security, environmental sustainability, and opportunities for meaningful engagement, would it not? It's a society where human flourishing is valued above mere economic productivity. Consider specific examples of systemic changes that have been demonstrably shown to improve well-being across entire populations. Universal health care, ensuring access to medical care regardless of income, reduces stress and improves health outcomes. Affordable housing, providing stable and secure homes, alleviates financial anxiety and fosters community. Shorter workweeks, allowing for more leisure time and personal pursuits, combats burnout and promotes work-life balance. Stronger social safety nets, offering support to those who are unemployed or facing hardship, reduce poverty and inequality. Robust environmental regulations, protecting our air and water, safeguard public health and preserve our planet for future generations. And policies that promote community engagement and civic participation foster social cohesion and a sense of belonging. Consider the Nordic countries, such as Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, which have consistently ranked high in global happiness surveys. These nations have implemented many of these systemic changes, resulting in lower rates of poverty, crime, and mental illness, as well as higher levels of social trust and overall life satisfaction. Think back to the historical impact of the 8-hour workday or the abolition of child labor policy shifts that dramatically impacted the well-being of entire societies. Analyzing the implications of pursuing systemic change reveals a cascade of positive effects. Reduced self-exploitation, as individuals are no longer solely responsible for their own well-being. Increased social trust and cohesion, as people feel more connected to and supported by their communities. Improved mental and physical health, as stress levels decrease and access to resources increases. A more equitable distribution of resources and opportunities, as systemic barriers are dismantled. And perhaps most importantly, a greater sense of collective well-being and purpose, as people feel like they are part of something larger than themselves. Connecting this back to Hand's critique of the performance society, systemic change is absolutely necessary to create a society that genuinely values human flourishing over relentless economic productivity and individual achievement. This necessitates a fundamental shift from a culture of ruthless competition to a culture of collaboration, genuine care, and mutual support. But here's where the shift must become personal. What systemic changes would you like to see implemented in your own communities and countries? And, perhaps more importantly, how might you contribute to making those changes a tangible reality? If systemic change is indeed essential for creating a more just and sustainable society, what role can individuals play in bringing about these sweeping transformations? How can we move beyond individual solutions and contribute to a broader movement for social and political transformation? What concrete actions can we take? If the solution extends beyond individual action to require change at a societal level, how do we move from individual well-being to collective well-doing? How can we translate the pursuit of personal flourishing into effective action that reshapes the world around us? Isn't the challenge not just to be well ourselves, but to create a world where well-being is possible for all? Let's define collective action as the coordinated effort of individuals towards a shared goal, a symphony of individual wills harmonizing to produce a societal crescendo. Contrast this with individualistic approaches that emphasize personal responsibility and self-reliance. Consider the stark differences. Individual action focuses on personal adaptation, while collective action aims to transform the environment. Think of it this way. An individual might learn to cope with stress through meditation, but collective action could advocate for policies that reduce stress in the workplace. We can explore various forms of collective action: protests, the vibrant cries of a populace demanding change; boycotts, economic levers that exert pressure on corporations; community organizing, the grassroots mobilization of local power; mutual aid networks, the weaving of safety nets for those in need; and political advocacy, the shaping of policy through the force of collective will. But what are the factors that enable successful collective action? Shared identity, the glue that binds individuals together; clear goals, the North Star that guides collective efforts; effective leadership, the conductor that orchestrates the symphony; and access to resources, the fuel that powers the engine of change. Consider some powerful examples of collective action driving societal change. The civil rights movement, a testament to the unwavering pursuit of equality, wasn't it? The women's suffrage movement, a relentless struggle for the right to vote. The environmental movement, a rising tide of concern for our planet. And the LGBTQ rights movement, a courageous march towards acceptance and liberation. Highlight key strategies employed: nonviolent resistance, a moral force that disarms oppression; grassroots organizing, the building of power from the ground up; legal challenges, the strategic use of the courts to advance justice; and public education, the spreading of awareness to shift hearts and minds. Take, for example, the landmark Supreme Court case Brown v. Board of Education, a direct result of collective legal action by the NAACP. Or consider the impact of the Montgomery bus boycott, a powerful act of nonviolent resistance that catalyzed the civil rights movement. But what about current examples? People uniting across divides to solve modern problems like climate change, economic inequality, and social injustice. Think about the Sunrise Movement, a youth-led organization advocating for climate action, or the Black Lives Matter movement, a global force demanding an end to systemic racism. Analyzing collective action's impact on well-being reveals a profound connection. Enhanced social cohesion, the strengthening of bonds between individuals. Empowerment, the reclaiming of agency and control. Amplified voices, the making of unheard perspectives, and a sense of purpose, the finding of meaning in collective endeavor. But what challenges are involved? Coordination, the logistical complexity of organizing large groups. Free rider problems, the temptation to benefit without contributing. And the potential for conflict, the clashing of egos and ideologies. To counter these challenges, inclusivity and democratic decision-making within collective efforts are important. Is real change possible if we don't work together, or are we doomed to remain isolated in our individual struggles? If we acknowledge that collective action is critical for societal change, how can we apply the practices explored in this series for individual well-being to these wider societal issues, to ensure that we're not recreating the same mistakes on a larger scale? How can we scale up the principles of mindfulness, self-awareness, and ethical conduct to guide our collective endeavors? Can we really be sure that well-intentioned movements are truly free of the pitfalls of self-deception and groupthink? While collective action can be a catalyst for positive change, is it inherently virtuous? What are the potential pitfalls and unintended consequences that we must be wary of to ensure that our collective efforts are truly aligned with our values? Isn't it possible for even the most idealistic movements to become corrupted by power, plagued by internal conflicts, or blinded by their own righteousness? Let's define groupthink as a psychological phenomenon where the desire for harmony within a group overrides critical thinking and leads to poor decision-making, a seductive siren song that lures even the most well-intentioned groups onto the rocks of irrationality. Explain the concept of moral licensing, which is a phenomenon where individuals who have engaged in morally praiseworthy behavior subsequently feel entitled to act in less moral ways, a dangerous loophole in our ethical reasoning. Contrast authentic collective action, driven by shared values, with performative activism, driven by social pressure, a shadow play of virtue signaling that masks a deeper apathy. And explain the Dunning-Kruger effect, overconfidence due to limited knowledge, and how it manifests in activist circles, a recipe for disaster when passionate conviction trumps informed understanding. Provide some examples of groupthink leading to disastrous decisions. The Bay of Pigs invasion, a cautionary tale of flawed intelligence and unchallenged assumptions. The Challenger space shuttle disaster, a tragic consequence of prioritizing conformity over safety. What about examples of moral licensing justifying harmful behavior? Environmental activists using excessive resources, or social justice advocates engaging in online harassment. Consider the Occupy movement, initially a powerful force for economic justice, which was ultimately fractured by internal conflicts and a lack of clear goals. Or consider cults as an extreme version of groupthink, the tragic outcome of unquestioning obedience to a charismatic leader. Analyzing how groupthink, moral licensing, and performative activism can undermine collective action and lead to unintended consequences reveals a sobering reality. This stresses the importance of critical thinking, dissent, and accountability within collective efforts. Do we have a responsibility to challenge group norms when they conflict with our values, or should we simply go along to get along? Are we replicating the same patterns of self-deception and exploitation on a larger scale, Or are we truly learning from our mistakes? If we're to approach collective action cautiously, how can we, as individuals, contribute to it effectively and morally, despite the risk of the dangers explored in this section? How can we maintain our integrity and critical thinking skills while still working towards a common goal? Where do we draw the line between healthy collaboration and blind conformity? In light of the pitfalls of collective action, how can we harness the wisdom of individual practices to promote morality? Isn't the key to ethical collective action to cultivate a strong sense of individual responsibility, a moral compass that guides our actions even when swept up in the currents of group dynamics? How do we ensure that our collective efforts are truly aligned with our deepest values, rather than simply reflecting the prevailing norms of the group? Emphasize the importance of individual virtues, critical thinking, the ability to question assumptions and evaluate evidence, self-awareness, the understanding of our own biases and motivations, empathy, the capacity to understand and share the feelings of others, and moral courage, the willingness to stand up for what is right, even in the face of opposition. Argue that collective action is only as ethical as its individual members. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Discuss the concept of bearing witness, acting with awareness of events. Explore approaches from various philosophers or spiritual leaders. Consider the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, who emphasized the importance of individual integrity and nonviolent resistance, or the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, who argued for the importance of treating all individuals as ends in themselves, rather than merely as means to an end. Provide some historical examples of individuals who challenged group norms and acted with moral courage. Sophie Scholl, Rosa Parks, and whistleblowers like Edward Snowden. Share anecdotes of ordinary people who made a difference by speaking out against injustice or standing up for their beliefs. Highlight the importance of moral courage in professional and community settings, where the pressure to conform can be intense. For example, consider the story of Dr. Li Wenliang, the Chinese doctor who was silenced for warning about the coronavirus outbreak, but whose courage ultimately inspired widespread public outcry. Or consider the example of Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani activist who was shot by the Taliban for advocating for girls' education, but who continues to fight for the right of all children to learn. Analyzing how individual responsibility strengthens collective action reveals a powerful dynamic. Promoting ethical behavior, preventing the corruption of power, counteracting groupthink. The most effective movements recognize the importance of inner work, a recognition of the need for each and every member to engage in critical self-examination and moral reflection. And encourage. What small acts of individual courage can you take today to promote a more just and compassionate world? As individual choices impact society, and as the right society can allow people to flourish, how do we translate these concepts into a more just and well world? What is the final piece of the puzzle that allows us to bring all the lessons together? We've established how to maintain our ethics and what this looks like, but is that always enough? How do even the most well-intentioned movements sometimes become corrupted? What steps can we take to stay moral when even the noblest organizations are subject to decline? Movements, like individuals, can be susceptible to the corrupting influences of power, ideology, and group dynamics. Good intentions, unfortunately, are not immunity. Corruption in this context extends beyond mere financial mismanagement, encompassing a broader erosion of ethical principles and values. Various forms of corruption can plague movements. Financial mismanagement, where funds are diverted from their intended purpose. Abuse of authority, where leaders exploit their position for personal gain or to suppress dissent. Internal conflicts, where ideological clashes and power struggles undermine the movement's unity and effectiveness. And the abandonment of core values, where the movement compromises its principles in pursuit of short-term goals or political expediency. Think of the slippery slope, where small compromises can lead to significant ethical breaches, a gradual descent into moral decay. It's a dangerous path where seemingly minor deviations from principle pave the way for larger transgressions, each step making it harder to turn back. How many times have we heard the phrase, "It won't happen to us," only to witness the very thing they swore to avoid? The issues here share ground with the Lucifer effect, where situational forces and group dynamics can lead otherwise good people to commit terrible acts. We must recognize that the potential for corruption exists within every movement, regardless of its initial ideals. History is replete with movements that started with noble goals but eventually became corrupted. Consider the French Revolution, initially fueled by ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, but descended into the reign of terror, marked by mass executions and political repression. Or take Stalinism, which, in its pursuit of a communist utopia, resulted in the deaths of millions through purges, forced collectivization, and political persecution. Certain religious cults, starting with messages of love and enlightenment, have devolved into manipulative and exploitative organizations led by charismatic but ultimately destructive figures. What factors contributed to their downfall? Unchecked power, where leaders become unaccountable to their followers. Ideological extremism, where rigid adherence to dogma stifles critical thinking and dissent. A lack of accountability, where transparency is sacrificed in the name of efficiency or expediency. And the suppression of dissent, where those who question the movement's direction are silenced or ostracized. Take, for example, the case of Enron, a company lauded for its innovation and success, but ultimately exposed for its fraudulent accounting practices that enriched a few at the expense of many. Or consider the Catholic Church, which has faced numerous scandals involving the abuse of children, a dark legacy of institutional cover-ups, and a failure to protect the vulnerable. The corruption of movements undermines their effectiveness, erodes public trust, and perpetuates the very injustices they claim to fight against. When movements betray their values, they lose credibility and alienate their supporters. The pursuit of ambitious goals cannot justify sacrificing ethical integrity. The ends do not always justify the means. Transparency, accountability, and democratic decision-making within movements are essential to prevent corruption. Members must have the right to question their leaders, to hold them accountable for their actions, and to participate in shaping the movement's direction. Internal mechanisms for addressing grievances and resolving conflicts are crucial. Think about it. Are we doomed to see even the noblest movements crumble under their own weight, their initial promise choked by the vines of corruption? Byung-Chul Han's thoughts on transparency are relevant here, as he argues that excessive transparency can paradoxically lead to a loss of trust, as every flaw and imperfection is exposed, creating a climate of suspicion and cynicism. But is the alternative, secrecy, truly better? If movements are vulnerable to corruption, how can we equip ourselves to fight these issues? What key behaviors can be embraced, and where can we look for guidance as we work to create a better world? If movements are vulnerable to corruption, how can we equip ourselves to fight these issues? What key behaviors can be embraced, and where can we look for guidance as we work to create a better world? We've established how to maintain our ethics and what this looks like, but is that always enough? How do even the most well-intentioned movements sometimes become corrupted? What steps can we take to stay moral when even the noblest organizations are subject to decline? Building sanctuaries is paramount, but what does that mean for the 8 hours or more we spend at work each day? If building a sanctuary is so important, how can we focus less on what work provides us and more on what it asks of us? The answer, surprisingly, may lie in reclaiming something that has been largely lost in the modern world: craft. Craft, at its heart, is skilled physical labor that demands our full attention, patience, and a deep connection to the material world. What if that connection to the physical world has been severed? Consider the stark contrast between a carpenter meticulously shaping a piece of wood and a data analyst manipulating spreadsheets. One engages with tangible reality, the other with abstract information. The loss of craft, accelerated by automation and the rise of desk jobs, has led to a decline in embodied knowledge, sensory awareness, and a profound sense of accomplishment. Think of blue-collar guilt, the often unspoken feeling that service or manual labor is somehow less valuable than intellectual work. This insidious belief devalues essential skills and contributes to a sense of alienation among those who perform them. How many times have we heard the phrase, "Get a good job so you don't have to work with your hands"? But is that truly progress? Consider the decline of craft in modern society. Manufacturing jobs are outsourced to distant lands, physical labor is automated by machines, and our education system increasingly prioritizes intellectual skills over manual skills. What happens to the working class when their skills are no longer valued? Compare a hand-made chair, crafted with care and precision, to a mass-produced chair churned out by a machine. One embodies the time, effort, and skill of its maker. The other is a product of efficiency and standardization. Historically, guilds played a vital role in preserving craft knowledge and skills, passing down traditions from master to apprentice. But as modern society has become increasingly specialized and industrialized, these guilds have largely disappeared. What specific skills have been lost to time? Consider the blacksmith, the cooper, the wheelwright, once essential professions, now relegated to niche hobbies or historical reenactments. What happens when that knowledge is lost? Think about artisans who have found meaning and purpose in their craft despite the challenges. The woodworker who painstakingly restores antique furniture, the potter who creates unique pieces from clay, the chef who transforms simple ingredients into culinary masterpieces. These individuals find fulfillment not just in the end product, but in the process itself, in the act of creation. But what happens when we're alienated from what we produce, when our work feels meaningless and disconnected from the physical world? Does this contribute to feelings of alienation, meaninglessness, and a loss of connection to the physical world? Can this be connected to Hand's critique of the performance society, where efficiency and productivity are prioritized over creativity, skill, and embodied experience? What happens when the work loses the soul? Think about your own relationship with physical labor. How can you incorporate more craft-based activities into your life? Perhaps gardening, cooking, woodworking, or even simply taking the time to repair something instead of replacing it. This may be the key to sanity. If a lack of purpose and physical touch is the source of many problems, can we develop a solution? How can a love of knowledge become a catalyst and not a hindrance? Here, we stumble upon another challenge of modern society, the rise of techno-feudalism. If a lack of purpose and physical touch is the source of many problems, can we develop a solution? How can a love of knowledge become a catalyst and not a hindrance? Building directly on this disconnect with physical work, we must confront the concept of techno-feudalism and its connection to economic inequality. Are we actually free in the modern world, or are we digital serfs? The answer, as uncomfortable as it may be, is that the line is increasingly blurred. Techno-feudalism can be defined as a system where economic power is concentrated in the hands of a few tech companies that control access to essential digital resources. How does this differ from traditional capitalism? In traditional capitalism, there is at least a theoretical possibility of upward mobility. But in techno-feudalism, the tech giants act as gatekeepers, extracting value from users through data collection, algorithmic manipulation, and the creation of digital dependencies. What specific dependencies have been created? Consider how many modern tech jobs are actually service jobs for tech overlords, driving for Uber, delivering for Amazon, or creating content for social media platforms. But what is the catch? These workers often lack the benefits and security of traditional employment, existing in a precarious state of digital peonage. Look at the economic dynamics of platforms like Amazon, Uber, and Facebook. These companies amass enormous wealth by connecting users and facilitating transactions, but the vast majority of the profits flow to the top, leaving many workers struggling to make ends meet. So, what can be done? Statistics paint a grim picture of the concentration of wealth and power in the tech industry. A handful of companies control vast amounts of data, infrastructure, and capital, giving them unprecedented influence over our lives. The rise of the gig economy has further exacerbated this problem, eroding worker rights and economic security. How can this be addressed? Consider the Amazon warehouse worker who faces grueling conditions and constant surveillance, or the Uber driver who struggles to earn a living wage after expenses. These are not isolated cases. They are symptoms of a systemic problem. The challenges of regulating tech companies and preventing them from abusing their power are immense. These companies operate on a global scale, often evading national laws and regulations. How can we create a level playing field and ensure that these companies are held accountable for their actions? Techno-feudalism contributes to self-exploitation, economic inequality, and a loss of autonomy. Individuals are increasingly forced to compete for scarce resources within a system rigged in favor of the tech elite. But to what extent are we complicit in our own exploitation? What choices are available to us? Think about your own relationship with tech companies. Are you a user or are you being used? How much of our lives are we willing to let them control? As Byung-Chul would argue, our obsession with convenience and efficiency has blinded us to the insidious ways in which technology is shaping our behavior and eroding our freedom. What are the long-term consequences of this digital dependency? What practical steps can we take to resist techno-feudalism and reclaim our digital sovereignty? How can we challenge the power of these companies and create a more equitable digital future? This brings us to an even more fundamental question. If tech companies are vying for our attention, what can we do to take back control of it? What practical steps can we take to resist techno-feudalism and reclaim our digital sovereignty? How can we challenge the power of these companies and create a more equitable digital future? Building on the previous section's analysis of tech dominance, we must now zero in on our most precious resource, our attention. If tech companies are vying for our attention, what can we do to take back control of it? The stakes couldn't be higher. The attention economy is a system where attention becomes a scarce commodity that is bought and sold by advertisers and tech companies. But what does this mean for our ability to think critically, make informed decisions, and live meaningful lives? Algorithms and persuasive design techniques are used to capture and manipulate our attention, often without our conscious awareness. What specific techniques are used? Consider brain hacking, the practice of designing technology to exploit vulnerabilities in our brains and keep us hooked. But what are the ethical implications of this system? Are we being treated as consumers or as commodities? Is our attention being stolen from us? Data paints a disturbing picture of the amount of time people spend on their phones each day. The average person spends hours scrolling through social media feeds, watching videos, and checking notifications. What are we missing out on when we're glued to our screens? Think about individuals who have struggled with technology addiction, losing their jobs, neglecting their relationships, and sacrificing their mental and physical health. These are not isolated cases. They are warning signs of a larger societal problem. Persuasive design techniques used by social media platforms and video games are highly effective at capturing and holding our attention. How do these techniques work? Notifications, infinite scrolling, and autoplay features are designed to keep us hooked, triggering dopamine releases and reinforcing compulsive behaviors. What if we could redesign these technologies to be less addictive and more aligned with our well-being? The attention economy undermines our ability to focus, think critically, and make informed decisions. Our minds are constantly bombarded with information, making it difficult to discern what is truly important. How does this affect our ability to engage in deep thought, to solve complex problems, and to make meaningful contributions to the world? As Byung-Chul would argue, we are selling our minds for convenience, trading our ability to think for ourselves for the fleeting pleasures of instant gratification. To what extent are we selling our minds? What is the true cost of this transaction? If attention is so valuable, what can we do to value ourselves? Posing that question to make it all come full circle, how can we cultivate a mindset that values authenticity over validation, connection over convenience, and meaning over efficiency? And how does this relate to the deeper questions of freedom and self-determination that Han raises in his work? What does any of this even mean? As we reach the end of our exploration into Byung-Chul Han's critique of modern life, it's time to bring together the many threads we've examined, from self-exploitation to techno-feudalism, from the erosion of craft to the tyranny of the attention economy. These concepts, seemingly disparate, are in fact deeply interconnected facets of a society obsessed with optimization, performance, and relentless self-improvement. What, then, is the overarching narrative that emerges from this complex web of ideas, and how can we use this knowledge to reclaim our lives? We've seen how the relentless pursuit of achievement, fueled by internal pressures and external expectations, leads to a state of chronic burnout and exhaustion. We've uncovered the ways in which technology, far from liberating us, often serves to enslave us, sucking away our attention and turning us into data-generating commodities. And we've explored how the decline of craft and the rise of techno-feudalism contribute to a sense of alienation, meaninglessness, and a loss of connection to the physical world. In essence, we've painted a picture of a society that, in its relentless pursuit of progress, has paradoxically undermined the very foundations of human flourishing. The core value we keep circling back to is that of awareness, a constant, almost defiant awareness of the forces acting upon us. Do you recall our initial discussion of the hamster wheel, the metaphor for the ceaseless activity that defines modern existence? Consider how that image encapsulates the very essence of Han's critique. We run and run, striving for ever greater levels of achievement, yet we remain trapped in a cycle of self-exploitation, never truly arriving, never truly satisfied. And remember our examination of social media algorithms, those invisible forces that shape our perceptions and manipulate our desires. These are not merely abstract concepts. They are powerful forces that exert a tangible influence on our daily lives. How can we break free from this cycle? Stay with me, because the answer requires a shift in perspective and a conscious commitment to reclaiming our agency. The ultimate insight, the most profound truth that emerges from Han's philosophy, is that genuine freedom lies not in maximizing productivity, but in cultivating awareness, connection, and a deep appreciation for the present moment. It's about recognizing the insidious ways in which the performance society infiltrates our minds and shapes our behavior, and then consciously choosing to resist those forces. This is not an easy path. It requires a willingness to challenge deeply ingrained beliefs and to embrace values that run counter to the prevailing cultural norms. But it is, without a doubt, the most rewarding path, the path towards a more authentic, meaningful, and fulfilling existence. It requires constant vigilance and the courage to say no to the demands of a society that relentlessly seeks to exploit our time, our attention, and our very selves. This involves a fundamental rejection of the notion that our worth is determined by our achievements, our productivity, or our social media following. But this isn't just about individual self-improvement. It's about the need for systemic change. The issues we've discussed, self-exploitation, techno-feudalism, the attention economy, are not merely personal struggles. They are symptoms of a deeper societal malaise. They reflect a system that prioritizes profit over people, efficiency over meaning, and endless growth over sustainability. What does this mean for our collective future? It means that we need to advocate for policies that promote work-life balance, protect worker rights, regulate tech companies, and foster a more equitable distribution of wealth and power. It means that we need to support initiatives that promote community, creativity, and a deeper connection to the natural world. It extends to future generations and requires an evaluation of the world we are leaving behind. So, as we conclude, let us not succumb to despair or resignation. While the challenges of modern life are indeed formidable, they are not insurmountable. You have the power to make conscious choices, to reclaim your time and attention, to cultivate meaningful relationships, and to create a life that aligns with your values. Remember, as we discussed, the importance of craft, of engaging in activities that demand our full attention and connect us to the physical world. Embrace the power of saying no, of setting boundaries, and of prioritizing experiences over achievements. As you move forward, stay aware. And so, I encourage you to reflect on the ideas presented in this video and consider how you can apply them to your own life. What small, concrete steps can you take this week to reclaim your time, energy, and sense of self? Where can you embrace slowness, contemplation, and connection in a world that relentlessly demands speed, efficiency, and performance? Remember, the journey towards a more authentic and fulfilling life is a lifelong process, but it is a journey worth taking. Embrace the challenges, cultivate connection, and never stop questioning the world around you.